Hey everyone, so today we're going to be diving into something you specifically requested, uh, obstructive sleep apnea, OSA. You sent over some medical research on this, and I got to say it's cuminous. It's pretty eye-opening. I'm really curious to hear what you think about all this stuff. Seems like you want to understand what OSA is, how to spot it, and what you can do about it. So let's get started. Can you give us like a clear picture of what's actually happening when someone has obstructive sleep apnea?
Absolutely. So, in the simplest terms, obstructive sleep apnea happens when your breathing repeatedly pauses during sleep. And that's because your airway becomes narrowed or blocked. You can kind of think of your throat like a tunnel that, for some people, it partially collapses inward during sleep, making it hard to breathe.
Okay. I'm starting to see why this is like a bigger deal than just like a little snoring. The research mentioned that snoring is a common symptom, but not all snoring means you have OSA. So how can we tell the difference?
That's a great question. Not all snoring is created equal. You're right. Simple snoring can be caused by things like congestion or even just your sleep position, but the snoring that's associated with OSA, that's usually much louder. And it's often punctuated by gasps or like snorting sounds as the person struggles to breathe. It's kind of like the difference between a gentle stream and a raging river, trying to force its way through a narrow channel.
Wow, that's a powerful analogy. Really makes you realize how disruptive this must be to sleep. The source also mentioned that the uvula, that little dangly thing at the back of our throats, can actually act like a flap that partially covers the airway. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just the shape of our throats. What else makes someone prone to OSA?
Yeah, you're hitting on a key point. It's not just about one thing. There are a bunch of risk factors, and some are structural. For example, having a shorter lower jaw compared to your upper jaw, that can actually crowd the airway, making it more likely to collapse. And it's not just jaw size. A narrow palate, larger neck size, or even a larger tongue, those can all contribute too.
So it's like a puzzle where all these anatomical pieces can increase the risk. It makes me think about how interconnected things are in our bodies. But the research also mentioned obesity as a major risk factor. Is that just because extra weight puts pressure on the airway? Or is there more to it?
It's definitely a complex issue. And you're right, excess weight can put pressure on the airway, especially when lying down. But it also goes deeper than that. Fat deposits can build up around the neck and even within the airway itself.
Further narrowing that passage, what's really concerning
Yeah.
is that the source connects rising obesity rates to a surge in OSA diagnoses. It's almost like OSA is becoming a silent epidemic alongside the obesity
This
epidemic.
is a sobering thought. It makes you realize how much our lifestyle choices can impact our sleep and ultimately our health. And speaking of lifestyle, the source pointed out that sleeping position can also play a role. I always thought that was an old wives' tale. What's the science behind that? It's actually not a tale at all. When you sleep on your back, gravity can pull your tongue and soft palate back towards your throat, and that further obstructs the airway. It's like when a heavy curtain gets sucked out of an open window on a windy day. For some people, simply shifting to their side, that can make a big difference.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm already starting to rethink how I sleep, so we've got a good grasp on what OSA is
Yeah.
and who's at risk. But what does it actually feel like? What are the symptoms someone might experience?
Well, aside from the telltale loud snoring
Hmm.
and gasping or snorting sounds, there are a lot of symptoms that might not seem connected to sleep at first glance. Think about how you feel after a really bad night's sleep. Tired, groggy, maybe a little irritable, right? Those are some classic signs of OSA.
Mhm.
But they're often much more intense and persistent.
So it's like being chronically sleep deprived, but maybe without realizing why.
Exactly. It's not just about feeling tired, though. The research highlighted daytime sleepiness so severe that it can interfere with work, relationships, and even dangerous activities like driving. And it can also affect your mood, making you more irritable, anxious, or even depressed. The source even mentions cognitive issues like brain fog and forgetfulness as common symptoms.
Wow, this is definitely more serious than I initially thought. It sounds like untreated OSA can really impact your daily life in a lot of ways. It's making me think about those times I've brushed off feeling tired or having trouble concentrating, assuming it was just stress or being overworked. Have you noticed any patterns in the types of people who tend to dismiss these symptoms?
That's a great observation. Unfortunately, it's quite common for people to downplay or rationalize these symptoms. They might blame it on age, stress, or a busy schedule. But ignoring these signs can have serious consequences. What's concerning is that OSA often goes undiagnosed, especially in women, who may experience different symptoms than men. They might not have the classic loud snoring, but instead experience more subtle signs like fatigue, insomnia, or mood changes. This is why it's so crucial to be aware of the full range of symptoms. And seek help if you have any concerns. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, you've hit on a really important point there. It is easy to write off those symptoms as just part of life, but ignoring them can have some pretty serious consequences for your health down the road. And that's what I really want to emphasize here.
Okay, yeah, the research you sent over was pretty alarming, talking about links to high blood pressure, heart problems, even stroke. I knew OSA was serious, but I didn't realize it could impact so many different parts of the body. What's the connection there? Well, it all comes back to, you know how vital sleep is for our bodies. To function properly, when we consistently don't get enough quality sleep, it puts stress on every single system. And with OSA, it's not just about missing out on sleep, it's about the physiological stress that's caused by those repeated drops in blood oxygen levels and surges in blood pressure that happen every time your breathing pauses during the night. Over time, that can really take a toll on your cardiovascular system.
So it's not just about feeling tired. It's like your body is in a constant state of stress.
Exactly, and that chronic stress
Mm.
can contribute to a whole cascade of health problems. The research highlighted several studies showing a strong correlation between untreated OSA and an increased risk of developing high blood pressure, heart arrhythmias,
Mm.
which are basically irregular heartbeats, and even stroke. It's pretty sobering stuff.
It really is. It makes you think twice about those, common health complaints. Like maybe that nagging fatigue or those headaches aren't just stress or getting older, like we often assume. What's fascinating here is that, sleep apnea can often fly under the radar. Like people might be treating the symptoms of something else.
Yeah.
But if the underlying cause is OSA, they might not be getting to the root of the problem.
You're absolutely right. It's like a hidden puzzle piece, Imagine someone going through treatment for high blood pressure, but their blood pressure just won't stabilize. It's possible that untreated OSA is contributing to the problem. The research even pointed to a link between OSA and depression, which isn't always obvious. We often think of depression as, a purely psychological issue. But there's a growing understanding of the complex interplay between sleep, mood, and brain chemistry.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that everything in our body is connected. Okay, so let's say someone is listening to this and thinking, okay, this sounds a lot like me. What do I do now? What's the first step in getting diagnosed?
Well, the good news is, diagnosing OSA is pretty straightforward these days. The gold standard is a sleep study, which sounds intimidating, but it's really not that bad.
I have to admit, the thought of being hooked up to a bunch of machines in a lab all night kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies.
I hear you, but it's not as scary as it sounds. Plus, it's gotten much easier in recent years. With the development of at-home sleep studies, these involve simpler equipment that you can use in the comfort of your own bed.
So you can basically get diagnosed without ever leaving your house. That takes away a lot of the stress.
Exactly. Of course, your doctor will determine which type of study is right for you based on your individual circumstances. They'll also take a detailed medical history and might run some additional tests like checking your blood oxygen levels or doing an electrocardiogram or EKG to assess your heart health.
Okay, so let's say you get diagnosed. What happens next? What are the treatment options for OSA?
Well, the great news is there's a whole range of effective treatments for OSA. And the first line of defense often involves simple lifestyle changes that you can start implementing right away.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about these lifestyle changes.
Well, think back to those risk factors we talked about earlier. Some of them, like your anatomy, you can't change. But others, like weight and sleep position, are modifiable. Losing even a small amount of weight if you're overweight or obese can make a significant difference. And we talked about how sleeping position matters, so simply avoiding sleeping on your back can be helpful. Other things that can help include avoiding alcohol or sedatives before bed, as they can relax your throat muscles even further and worsen airway blockage, and creating a consistent sleep schedule to regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
That makes sense. Those are all things you can control, which is empowering. But what about cases where lifestyle changes just aren't enough? What are the medical treatment options?
For moderate to severe OSA, the most common and often most effective treatment is continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP therapy. You've probably heard of CPAP machines.
Yeah, I have. But I have to admit, I don't really understand how they work. I've heard some people say those masks can feel claustrophobic. What does CPAP involve? And what do you tell patients who are hesitant to try it?
It's a valid concern. It does take some getting used to. Basically, with CPAP, you wear a mask over your nose, or nose and mouth, while you sleep. This mask is connected to a machine that gently pumps air into your airway, creating just enough pressure to keep it open and prevent those breathing pauses. Think of it like a gentle splint for your airway, keeping it from collapsing during sleep. It might feel strange at first, but for many people, the benefits far outweigh the initial discomfort. They report feeling more rested and alert during the day. Their snoring often disappears. And most importantly, those long-term health risks associated with untreated OSA are significantly reduced. It can be truly life-changing.
That is amazing. It's incredible how something that seems so simple can have such a profound impact.
It really is. And the technology has come a long way. CPAP machines are much smaller and quieter than they used to be. And there are many different types of masks available. To find one that fits comfortably, if someone is hesitant, I always encourage them to give it a try. And work with their doctor or a sleep specialist to find the right mask and settings. It can take a little time to adjust, but the payoff is worth it.
It sounds like you're really emphasizing that it's a process, and it might take some trial and error to find what works best for each individual. But you're also saying that for many people, CPAP can be incredibly effective. Are there other options if CPAP just doesn't work for someone?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
Some people benefit from dental devices that reposition the jaw and tongue to help keep the airway open, and in some cases, surgery might be an option to remove excess tissue or correct structural abnormalities that are contributing to the airway blockage. But it's important to remember that CPAP is often the first and most effective line of treatment. And with some patience and support, most people can adjust to using it successfully.
Okay, so it sounds like the key takeaway here is that there are solutions out there, and no one should suffer in silence.
Exactly. OSA is not something to ignore or try to tough out on your own. With the right diagnosis and treatment, you can drastically improve your sleep quality, your overall health, and your quality of life.
It's so encouraging to hear that there are, effective treatments. And that people don't have to just live with this, as we've been talking. Something that's been running through my mind is how OSA seems to intersect with so many other health issues. The research you sent mentioned connections to things like depression, high blood pressure, and even headaches. Is it possible that some people are treating these symptoms without realizing that OSA could be like a contributing factor?
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation, and you're right on the mark. One of the most challenging things about OSA is that it can often masquerade as other health problems. People might be struggling with fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, or even heart problems, but they might not connect those issues back to their sleep.
Right. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with a missing piece. You could be treating the symptoms of something else. But if the underlying cause is OSA, you're not addressing the root of the problem. It really highlights how important it is to look at the whole picture of someone's health.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that everything in the body is connected. Take headaches, for instance. The research talked about how the repeated drops in blood oxygen levels during the night can actually trigger headaches, especially in the morning. So someone might be taking medication for headaches. But if they have undiagnosed OSA, addressing that sleep issue might be the key to finding real relief.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how many people are going through treatments or struggling with symptoms
And
that could potentially be improved by addressing their sleep. It's a whole new way of thinking about health.
it really is. And it speaks to the importance of being proactive and advocating for your own health. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms we've talked about, don't be afraid to bring it up with your doctor, even if it turns out not to be OSA. Having open and honest conversations about your health is crucial.
Well, I think this has been an incredibly informative deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the mechanics of snoring to the far-reaching health impacts of untreated OSA, and most importantly, the fact that there are solutions out there. As we wrap up, what are some key takeaways you hope our listener walks away with today?
Well, first and foremost, I want to emphasize that OSA is more common than people think, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It can affect anyone, regardless of age, gender, or lifestyle. The key is to be aware of the symptoms and to seek help if you have any concerns. Early diagnosis and treatment can truly make all the difference in improving your sleep,
Yep.
overall health, and your quality of life.
So well said. And don't forget, even if you haven't been diagnosed with OSA, paying attention to your sleep hygiene can have a huge impact on how you feel. Things like sticking to a regular sleep schedule, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, and making sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool. Those are all great habits for everyone.
Absolutely. Those are simple but powerful things we can all do to prioritize our sleep and overall well-being.
Okay, as we leave our listener with something to ponder today, I'm curious, what's one question you wish more people would ask their doctor about sleep?
That's a great question. I think the most important question is simply, could my sleep be impacting my health? It opens up a conversation about sleep quality, sleep habits, and any potential concerns. It's fascinating how something as essential as sleep is often overlooked when it comes to health. We tend to focus on diet, exercise, stress management, but sleep is the foundation for all of it.
Such a great point. It's like building a house without a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Here's my final takeaway for our listener. Don't underestimate the power of a good night's sleep. It's an investment in your health, your well-being, and ultimately, your happiness. Until next time, keep diving deep.